I have a couple of memories when I'm a child. One of them is my first memory. This was probably about the time that I was an infant, and I was with my mother being dropped off at a babysitter who lived behind our house. And she took me out and dropped me off at the babysitter by putting me over a chain link fence. And I remember grabbing up at the chain link fence and crying, not wanting my mom to leave me. And the babysitter not quite knowing what to do, and my mother finding it really difficult to leave me. But all I decided to do was just go with my mom. So I perched myself on her shoulder, and as I looked down, I realized, oh, there's a baby over there crying, being left by his mom. That was me. Only I wasn't there inside that physical body. I was on my mom's shoulder and ready to go to work with her. That was my really first memory. Sometime later after that, I had a experience where I was with friends in our backyard, and we had a swing set. That swing set was made out of metal, and it was kind of old. It had been there a while and rusted. And it had a frame shaped like an A. You could crawl up on one side and stick your mouth to the pole that went across the top and talk into it, and then someone on the other side could stick their mouth and talk, and then you could listen back and forth. So I shouted out at my friend and saying, hey, 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 and then he shouted back at me, and I went to listen and say, hey, what do you think? And right about that time, a bee flew into my ear and stung me in the ear. From that, the only thing that I remember is being on the ground and screaming and having an infinite amount of people surrounding me on the ground going, what happened, what happened, what happened? And only later they found out that I'd been stung by that bee. That was my second memory that I remember. Then as I grew up, I got a little bit bigger, and I remember going to a special place in Texas where the water would spill out from a special collection place, a spillway, and as the water would gush out, fish would come through, and you could go fishing there and fish along an embankment. And while I was sitting there with my mom, she was showing me how to tie her shoe, and as she tied her shoe, I realized, oh, this string goes this way, this string goes this way, I could do this, and I don't know, within a few minutes I realized, oh, I actually was able to untie and tie her shoe, not my own. And that was kind of a sense of accomplishment that was kind of exciting whenever that happened. And then another memory I have was at my grandmother's house, where she lived in an old Depression-era home, where it was basically a house that was made for many people to live in, several families, but that was a long time back. So her and my grandfather lived in this home and had a big garden, and we'd go out into the garden and pick peas or green plums or whatever. And my parents couldn't understand why, when I would be at home, some of the food I would eat and some of the food I wouldn't, but when I went to grandmother's house, I'd eat every single thing that she would cook. But what was interesting about that was that grandmother always made everything from scratch. Nothing was out of a package or box or anything like that. And she had a can that sat on the stove, and she would dip into that and put that into a lot of foods. And in that can was bacon grease. And anything that she could put that bacon grease in, I'm pretty sure that I'd be willing to eat without any problem. She had a special recipe for biscuits, I remember, and she called them angel food biscuits. And they were like a cloud. And she had a bit of a secret recipe where she would make these biscuits with gravy and egg and bacon. And we found out over about a 10-year period of time that my mother was never able to copy that recipe, because my grandmother never wanted to give her all the ingredients just right, because she wanted to make sure that her son would come home and bring his family to visit her on the weekends and get some angel food biscuits. So later on, I think we kind of mapped that. And I just remember seeing her, my grandmother we call Nini, and she would sit and make the biscuits and pinch them off and put them in a pan and cover them with bacon fat, and they were just amazing. One time when we were in her house, my sister and I were put in the back bedroom, where she had a bed that was made out of feathers. And if you were a little kid and could run and jump on this bed, you would sink down into it like a trampoline or something like that, with big pillows. And it was kind of like, well, sleeping on a feather bed was nothing you had ever experienced before, because it was grandma's house and it was warm and safe, and it just felt special being there. So I mentioned how big the house was that she lived in, and one of the things about the house was sometimes I would find myself alone in the house and kind of go exploring. It was old and there was a lot of stuff my grandmother collected, and I could stick my hands and fingers and stuff. And one time they left me in one of the front rooms, and there was a heater that was burning with gas, and I was looking at the flames of the gas. It was really, really neat because the flames had a blue bottom, and then they were a little bit orange and a little bit yellow, and just looking at the flames was kind of mesmerizing. And I saw that to start that heater, they had some old matchsticks by the side that had been burned, and I could take the little pieces of matchsticks and stick it in there and burn a little bit of the matchstick, and another one burn it. I don't think the actual matches were there, but the old remnants were there. And I looked next to the heater, and I found there was a piece of paper inside a trash can. So I put that paper inside the heater and kind of burned it, and it went up pretty quick. And then I saw a special type of paper. I looked down in there. It was a blue paper. I didn't know as a little kid. It was carbon paper, so that you can make copies, and it had a highly flammable material inside. And I took that paper and I stuck it in the heater, and it caught fire, and it got so big and so fast it blew up right inside of my face and then disappeared. And then I got really scared because the flame had gone off and you could smell that chemical. So I tried to hide all the remnants of what I had done and that. And I don't think I got caught being a firebug, and I'm glad I didn't set the house on fire, but that was one of my memories that I remember sort of being mischievous as a kid. And that's sort of what I have for you. When I got a bit older, my memories became more than just flashes. They were kind of like stories I would play in my head. And I remember we moved to a new house, and my dad had gone outside and cut the grass in the front of the house, and a little bit later the paper boy had come by and thrown a paper in the front yard. And I went out and I noticed that the smell of the grass was really amazing, and just sort of took me away. And I'd helped my dad plant a tree in the front yard, and the paper boy had thrown the paper pretty close to that tree. So I picked up the paper, and I could smell the grass, and I could smell the ink on the paper. It's really interesting. And I put my head on the, I put the paper on the ground and put my head on the paper and looked up at the little tree that we had planted. And I was just sort of wondering, about the experience of smelling paper ink, or the experience of the tree, and would I ever be able to come back in the future and possibly see this tree grown up. And I started having this thought that, what if the world was made only when I was thinking of something? So for example, when we drove to my grandmother's house, what if the world was created as we drove? And that the world didn't exist unless I was actually conscious and thinking about the world. And so that would mean if I was sitting and smelling the grass and the ink of the paper, and decided to get up and walk down the street to my best friend's house, Larry Thetford, that the world would create and unfold in that moment. Kind of a funny memory that I have when I was a little kid. And then another memory I had was my first day at school. My father and my mom had taken us to school and had showed us how to walk home from school, but my sister was a year older and she was pretty outgoing and had friends. But when I went to school, I was pretty afraid because I wasn't quite as outgoing as her, and being away from mom and dad in my home was pretty scary for me. So I remember I got dropped off at school, and I found my seat, and I saw my teacher, and everybody was kind of collecting their pencils and papers and all of that stuff, and I realized this is super scary. I do not want to be here. So I got up out of the schoolroom, and I had been shown the way home, and I went backwards on my walk home and ran all the way, probably 4 or 5 blocks home. Got to my house. I had a key so I could get in afterward, and I got in and I hid under my bed. And I thought, man, that school was just too scary for me, so I'm going to hang out here most of the day, I think. And then I realized, well, my dad hasn't gone to work yet. What if he comes back? So I figured maybe this isn't a very good place to hang out. So I went outside, and I went to the side of our house, and I kind of crouched down beside the side of our house, and I hid there. And I saw him come and drive by a couple of times and come into the house, and it was pretty obvious that he was looking for me. And now I wasn't so afraid of having ditched school. I was more afraid, what if my dad found me and I wasn't in school? And my dad was a police officer, and he was driving around in his police car, and I wasn't sure what his reaction was going to be, but eventually he kind of discovered where I was, and he came and was really, really open and kind and honest and really concerned. He said, hey, what happened, and asked me about being afraid to go to school, and why I'd left the room, and he said, I wasn't sure if somebody come and got you, or if you were lost or what. He said, I was ready to call the whole police department and the whole fire department and get everybody looking for you. And then he told me a little bit what he had saw in school. He had gone back to, had dropped my sister off at her class and gone back to see me in my class, and I wasn't there. He said all the kids were there, and they were sharpening their pencils and getting their paper out and finding their seats, and it looked to him like that was going to be a pretty fun time because everybody was new on the first day of school, and would I be willing to go back to the first day of school? So he put me in his police car and drove me back to school, and I kind of got a special welcome when I got back there. And when I sat down, I just got the introduction of my first grade teacher. She was a really lovely lady, and she wanted to tell us what her name was, and so she went up to a green blackboard on the wall chalkboard, and she said, this here is a wall, and my name is Mrs. Wall, and another part of my name, and then she drew a picture of a drum, is drum. She said, my name is Mrs. Waldrum, and I'll be your first grade teacher. And just seeing how kind she was and how she was able to explain her name, draw the picture, just made me have a real affinity for her, and so school became less scary, and I was glad to be in her class on a regular basis. I stayed in that school for first grade, second grade, third grade, and by the time I got to second grade, I had got into magic. And my dad was a big fan of Houdini, a famous magician in America, and he watched a show about Houdini, and I got a magic kit for a birthday or a holiday or something like that. So I got pretty good at these magic tricks, and I decided that when I was in second grade, maybe I could put on a show for my sister's class. She was 1 year older, and I'd put on a magic show for the third grade class. So this was the first time I kind of got up and did anything outside of being just an individual and got up in front of people. And when I got up in front of her class and did the magic show, it was really, really exciting, and all the tricks went really well. But kids are pretty hard to do magic for because they can look around and see things and stuff like that. But I just remember that that was one of the best feelings ever, was to get up in front of a group of kids that were older than me and perform magic. And I thought one day, this might be one of the things that I do for a living, is go around and do magic, and maybe be a great escape artist like Houdini or something like that. So that was a pretty interesting moment for me. While we were in that school, we had an event that was quite harrowing. I remember we had tornadoes in that area of Texas, and one day at dinner, while we were talking about the dangers of maybe hurricanes, tornadoes, or things that happen in Texas, I had this thought that wouldn't it be exciting and neat to see a tornado, and we were at the dinner table, and I said, whoa, I'd really like to see a tornado. And my dad looked over at me really furious and said, what? Since he was a police officer, he had already seen catastrophes and what they could do for people, and he thought that was totally out of line that I would be excited about seeing a tornado. But sure enough, in our school a few weeks later, a tornado did come, and we had a warning. So all of the kids in our classes had to get out into the hallway and open all the windows for the tornado to come. And I remember the sky turning green and there being sounds of just incredible rumbling, and they opened all of the hallways, all of the windows, and we had to tuck it and cover inside the hallway. And I remember the kids crying and being afraid, and our music teacher coming through the halls and trying to get us to sing. But eventually we heard the rumble come and get louder and louder and louder. And when I looked up down the hallway, All I could see off in the distance of the playground above the trees was debris flying, and a giant tornado comes skating by and taking parts of houses, and I remember like porch posts and things like that, and just whirling around, and it was just really, really terrifying just to feel the energy and the power of a windstorm like that. And we were all safe and okay where we were, but it was a memory that stuck with me to this day. I still remember the fear in all of the other children, and what it was like to try and maintain calm and peace even in the midst of something as powerful that nature could produce, like a tornado. I want to thank you for watching and listening to my memories, and I hope you enjoyed that part of me sharing my spirit and my soul with you. Thank you for watching.